What if I told you that one of the world's biggest brands was built on a lie? Nike, the fashion giant, wasn't meant to be, but now it's worth over $100 billion. Here's the untold story of Phil Knight, the visionary who turned a bold idea into the iconic Nike brand. So, after college, Phil was still pretty lost. He'd always dreamed of being an athlete, but at 24 years old, he had to admit that ship had sailed. Despite all the training and lessons at college, he just never got to that level needed. He even joined the army for a year, thinking it would give him direction, but it didn't. Finally, he went to business school at Stanford, and it was there, while working on a project, that he had this crazy idea. He noticed how Japanese cameras had totally taken over from German ones. So, he thought, why not do the same thing with running shoes? At the time, German companies like Adidas and Puma were huge in America. But Phil had heard about some new Japanese designs and knew they could probably make shoes cheaper. He got really into this idea for his project and started thinking it could actually be a real business. But when he presented it to the class, nobody else thought it was a good idea. Even his friends didn't think much of it. And of course, if he wanted to do it himself, he had no idea how to. He didn't know anyone in Japan, and he didn't know anything about importing or selling shoes in America. So, could he really pull it off? After business school, Phil found himself back home, living with his parents and feeling like life was slipping by. Instead of waiting for something to happen, he decided to take action. He and a friend began a world trip, with Phil still focused on his idea of importing Japanese shoes. And then, in 1962, Phil arrived in Japan in search of shoes. He came across a brand called Tiger by Onitsuka, which caught his interest due to its quality and affordability. Despite having no business experience, Phil boldly called the company and managed to secure a meeting. He showed up pretending to be a big shoe distributor, armed only with facts from a college project. The company was eager to enter the American market, but when they asked about his company, Phil had none. Thinking quickly, he invented Blue Ribbon Sports of Portland, Oregon, on the spot. The gamble paid off, and the Japanese company agreed to make him their distributor. It seemed like his dream was about to become a reality. Months went by, and Phil still hadn't received the shoes. After a thrilling meeting in Japan, he was let down when his dad wrote saying, "You got scammed." Phil was really bummed. To get by, he took a job as an accountant. Then, out of nowhere, the 12 pairs of shoes finally arrived. Overjoyed, Phil showed them to his old running coach, Bill Bowerman. Bill, a well-known figure in the running world for his shoe innovations, was impressed and even offered to become Phil's business partner. It was a great fit. Bill knew everything about running and shoes. They started Blue Ribbon Sports, each putting in $500 and ordering 300 pairs from Japan. Phil also got Onitsuka to agree to make them their exclusive distributor in the Western U.S. Now he had a company, a partner, and 300 shoes, but no clue where to sell them, as local sports stores weren't interested. So, Phil realized he'd have to sell the shoes himself. Phil had 300 pairs of shoes to sell, so he hit the road, selling them at track meets and running clubs straight from the trunk of his car. With Bill Bowerman's help, they sold all 300 pairs in just 3 months. Selling the shoes came easily for Phil because people could feel his genuine belief in the product. By the end of the first year, they had sold $8,000 worth of shoes and ordered 900 more pairs. They even hired sales reps, mostly ex-runners who shared their passion, earning $2 per pair. The business grew fast. They secured a loan, moved out of Phil's parents' basement, and hired their first employee, Jeff Johnson, who later coined the name Nike. They opened a store that became a popular spot for runners. Meanwhile, Bill was busy designing shoes, and his design, the Cortez, became the bestseller in 1969. Everything seemed perfect with their supplier, Onitsuka. But Phil didn't know they were planning to betray them. Phil wanted to be the exclusive distributor for Tiger shoes across all of America, not just the West. At first, Onitsuka said no, but eventually agreed, impressed by Phil's company's growing presence. Confidently, Phil ordered 20,000 more pairs, but they didn't have an East Coast office. When he tried raising funds by selling shares, no one was interested. The only help came from employee Bob Woodell's parents, who reluctantly gave their entire $8,000 savings. Despite the strong partnership with Onitsuka, trouble was brewing. Blue Ribbon Sports was growing fast, but Onitsuka wasn't supplying shoes quickly enough, prioritizing Japanese customers and ignoring Phil and Bill's design ideas. At a tense meeting with Onitsuka's Kitami, Phil sensed something was wrong. He later discovered that Onitsuka was secretly negotiating with other distributors to replace Blue Ribbon. Feeling betrayed, Phil rejected Onitsuka's ultimatum to sell 51% of his company and prepared for a major showdown. Phil Knight and his team faced challenges after their split with Onitsuka, but it opened new opportunities. Free from the Japanese company, Phil and Bill Bowerman decided to create their own shoes. First, they needed a name. Phil's suggestion of Dimension 6 didn't appeal, but when Jeff Johnson shared a dream about the Greek goddess Nike, they adopted the name, though Phil wasn't fully convinced at first. Next came the logo, for which they paid a student $35 to design the now famous swoosh. The team's morale dipped when they heard about the break with Onitsuka, but Phil turned things around by highlighting their newfound freedom. They now had full creative control, which energized everyone. To avoid the mistakes from the past, Phil built a better network of manufacturers, giving them more control over quality. Although Onitsuka sued, claiming a breach of contract, Phil countersued, and they eventually settled. By the mid-1970s, Nike wasn't just selling shoes, they were selling a dream. Wearing Nike symbolizes strength and determination. People connected with the brand so deeply that it became more than a product. It became a symbol of greatness, positioning Nike as a global sensation. Nike's competitors, like Keds and Converse, were worried about Nike's rising popularity and didn't want them to dominate the market. They lobbied the government to use an old rule called ASP, dating back to before the Great Depression. This rule mandated a 20% tax on imported shoes similar to those made in America, meant to protect American companies. Since Nike's shoes were made in Japan, they were hit with this huge tax. Worse, the tax was based on the price of imitation Nike shoes, which were much more expensive. The government demanded back taxes for the past 3 years, totaling $25 million. Phil knew that paying $25 million would bankrupt Nike. So, he hired a top-notch lawyer and fought the government and competitors in court for 3 years. They even made a TV commercial to rally public support. Eventually, they settled for $9 million, which Nike could afford. Thanks to their explosive growth, revenue had soared to $440 million a year. Despite the close call, Nike emerged stronger than ever. And then, there was some good news on the horizon. In 1980, Nike went public. This solved their money problems and let them grow even faster. Phil, who owned 46% of the company, became very rich. Remember those parents who invested their life savings to help Nike when they were struggling? Well, after Nike went public, their $8,000 investment was worth $1.6 million. It was life-changing. Nike kept getting bigger. They signed deals with Chinese factories and started selling clothes. This helped them make more money and attract athletes for endorsements. One of their biggest deals was with Michael Jordan. He was a rookie when they signed him, but he became a huge star. His Air Jordan shoes made hundreds of millions of dollars. By 1986, Nike was the biggest sports brand in America. But behind all that success was a dark secret. A secret about violence, intimidation, slavery, harassment, and child labor. And that secret was about to be exposed. In 1991, Nike faced a serious crisis when labor activist Jeffrey Ballinger released the film Behind the Swoosh, accusing the company of exploiting workers and using child labor in developing countries. The film showed workers enduring long hours for very low pay under terrible conditions. Things got worse in 2001 when a BBC documentary revealed child labor in a Cambodian factory used by Nike, where 6 girls worked up to 16 hours a day, 7 days a week. These revelations sparked protests, boycotts, and universities cutting ties with Nike. Sales dropped, and the company's stock price fell by 15%. Phil Knight, once seen as a hero, now looked like the villain. In response, Phil promised to improve factory conditions, and Nike spent the next decade working to restore its reputation. Although the company made progress and earned some praise from human rights activists, issues like long hours and low wages persisted in some factories. Despite the challenges, Nike turned the controversy into a learning opportunity, reflecting the complexities of running a global brand. In 2018, Nike launched the Dream Crazy ad featuring Colin Kaepernick, known for kneeling during the national anthem to protest racial injustice. The ad stirred controversy, leading to a drop in Nike's stock price and boycotts. However, it also attracted a wave of support from Kaepernick's backers, who bought Nike products in solidarity. The controversy ultimately paid off for Nike, boosting their brand value by $6 billion, earning $163 million in media exposure, and increasing sales by 31%. The ad even won an Emmy. By 2019, Nike was making waves again, but this time in the running world. On October 12th, Kenyan marathoner Eliud Kipchoge became the first to break the 2-hour marathon barrier, and the next day, fellow Kenyan Brigid Kosgei set a new women's marathon record. Both athletes wore Nike's groundbreaking Vaporfly shoes, which claim to make runners up to 4.2% faster. Since their release, Vaporfly-wearing runners have set 5 of the 10 fastest marathon times ever. However, the Vaporflies have sparked debate, with some arguing they give runners an unfair advantage and should be banned from races. While Nike insisted that the shoes were within the rules, they were ultimately banned from all competitive sports. Nike's marketing team has always been great at balancing risks and rewards, playing a key role in their success. In just 10 years, Nike's sales soared from $800 million to $9.2 billion. But after 40 years, Phil Knight stepped down as CEO, with John Donahoe taking over. With new leadership, though, came fresh challenges. In June 2024, Nike faced a major setback when their stock prices dropped nearly 20%, wiping out $28 billion in shareholder wealth. It was the biggest one-day drop in their history, shocking the financial world. The reason? Demand for trendy lifestyle sneakers like Dunks had slowed down more than Nike expected. These once popular sneakers weren't selling like they used to, and Nike had overestimated demand, leading to a surplus of inventory. To clear it up, they slashed prices and cut costs, which included laying off 2% of their corporate staff. Though the stock drop was a major hit, Nike has a history of bouncing back from things like things and are already taking the necessary steps to recover from this setback. Phil Knight's story is one of determination and creativity, showing that amazing things can be accomplished. but it's also about doing business the right way. Success isn't just about making money. It's about building a company that truly cares for its employees and the community. It's an incredible journey. A kid with no experience goes to Japan to turn a wild idea into reality, ultimately creating the biggest sports brand in the world. If you want to know more about it, you can check the links in the description. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel. You can also follow us on different social media platforms. Links are mentioned in the description box below.